Now, the release of the Operation Yellowhammer documents, along with a Scottish court ruling that the suspension of Parliament was unlawful, have intensified calls for MPs to return to Westminster amid accusations of authoritarianism, dictatorship and a contempt for the rule of law. Boris Johnson's critics are wrong, though, to accuse him of outrageously trying to subvert democracy by threatening to ignore Parliament's decision to prolong our stay in the EU. Actually, he's fighting to save democracy. The 21 Tory MPs expelled from the Tory party, they all oppose Brexit, which is the party's most central policy. And if the Tories win an election, with a majority or not, they'd be back in the Commons, continuing their civil war. By taking no deal off the table, the Remainer Parliament is tying the Prime Minister's hands in the way the Labour Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin memorably said, "We're sending him naked to the conference chamber." Most Tory MPs I talk to are sticking with Boris and the machismo talk because they calculate the threat to democracy if the referendum result is not delivered outweighs arguments about whether the PM can or can't get around two Commons votes which were designed with one purpose: to kill Brexit.
Just a couple of questions. So, is a no-deal Brexit the will of the people?
The will of the people, Femi, was expressed in the biggest democratic vote in this country.
Specifically a no-deal Brexit.
Can I answer the question my way? The will of the people was for Britain to leave the European Union. The 17.4 million people who voted for that sent a very clear instruction to Parliament. Parliament gets its sovereignty not from those self-serving MPs, from the people who put them there. And the mandate was very clear: take us out of the European Union. There was nothing on the ballot paper about deal or no deal, about Mrs May's withdrawal. It was to get us out, and we should have got out on March the 31st.
So you think it would have been the will of the people to leave with the deal we just negotiated, the Theresa May's withdrawal?
We should leave the European Union, and I tell you what I would have done last time. I would have voted for her deal. Worse, not a great deal, but better than what we've got at the moment. The antics of your side, the Remainers, they're paralysing Parliament, they're paralysing the country, and because of that, confidence is draining away from businesses who are crying out for a decision.
So Nigel Farage says that that's the worst deal in history. He says it's worse than staying in the EU, as is most Brexit voters. They say it's worse than staying in the EU because it means we're less sovereign, following the rules of the EU with no say. So objectively, that is a version of Brexit that most Brexit voters do not want. Would you not agree?
I think most Brexit voters don't want that, but I tell you, they are so fed up now, Femi, they just want to get out, and I would support no-deal Brexit if that's all we've got. And I can't believe your lot, actually, who are utterly wedded to stopping Brexit in its tracks. I don't know why you are.
Can I just broaden it out from your lot, our lot?
Well, it is like that, isn't it?
Actually,
because it's been made like that, because Parliament is being ignored.
You presented this as the need to protect democracy, which, by the way, I didn't vote Brexit, but I've always said I think protecting our democracy is of the utmost importance, which is why I think a lot of Remainers accept that a deal is something that we need to pursue. Right. How do you protect democracy? By having the executive say they might be willing to break the law, which Boris Johnson did, by misleading the Queen and proroguing Parliament illegally, which the highest court that has adjudicated on the matter so far has found that this prorogation is unlawful, which means that the third thing that's now happened is that our legislature, which is one of the constitutional branches of state that is crucial to our democracy, fundamental to our democracy, is suspended potentially to stop it working and doing its proper function.
You choose the verdict of the appeal court in Scotland, you ignore the first...
It's the highest court that has adjudicated on the subject
and you ignore the verdict of the High Court in England and Wales, which said there was nothing improper or illegal. Now, it's up to the Supreme Court to decide, but what I would say...
The way that our legal system works is that the higher court overrules a lower court.
I think
so, as we sit today, the highest court that has decided on the matter has found that our Parliament is currently unlawfully prorogued. That is... so serious.
And can I just say, put this in perspective, remember this, we talk about proroguing. If Parliament hadn't been prorogued, it would have met for a further 4 days, and then next week, these MPs who are crying blue murder, constitutional vandalism, constitutional outrage, they'll go off to their party conferences. The Lib Dems, Jo Swinson, she'll be there in Bournemouth by the sea, and then we'll go to the Labour Party in Brighton.
They've actually said that they want to sit and not do, they want to cancel
I've not
party
heard
conferences.
a single member of the Labour shadow cabinet say we'll cancel the party conference because they want their weekend by the sea with the brotherhood.
MPs who showed up at Parliament yesterday hoping to be able to do their job
about 20 of
said
them.
they would like to do that. I just want to let you hear from Joanna Cherry, who is the SNP politician who brought this case.
This is a unanimous decision by Scotland's highest court that the prorogation of Parliament by Boris Johnson was unlawful. And as Tommy Shepherd, one of my co-petitioners, has pointed out, now, for every moment Parliament remains prorogued, the British government are breaking the law. So we, as politicians, are calling for Parliament to be recalled so that we can get on with scrutinising what this government is up to in relation to Brexit.
Now, we've heard how this government has so far said it's willing to break the law, has now suspended the legislature. The third way in which they have not protected democracy is that we've now heard a cabinet minister suggesting that it might be valid to regard the judiciary as biased. I cannot think of a more serious attack on our democracy in my lifetime. And if that's your idea of protecting it, I think that we're living on completely different planets.
You're living, respectfully, and I don't mean this personally, but there is, if anyone's living on another planet, it's those who have completely lost touch with what people outside of Westminster, and I know Scotland's outside of Westminster, the vast majority of people who voted for Brexit, they are sickened by the fact that it would appear, unless you're a Scottish judge or you studied PPE at Oxford, you don't have the wit, you don't have the intellect, you're not even to be listened to. The fact that these, as Andrew rightly says, these appalling MPs decide to perform in this fashion. They were given a task to carry out. Boris Johnson, come back, let's remember, Andrew's debate is about Boris Johnson had absolutely no alternative. Those 21 who voted that way, I hope that they find a way back in, but this has to be done for the mental health of everybody, not just somebody who contacted you.
Let's just hear from Boris Johnson.
There's a massive, massive agenda. We need a Queen's speech. That's why Parliament is in recess now, because you always have a recess before a Queen's speech. And anybody who says it's all, this stuff about it being anti-democratic, I mean, donnez-moi un break. What a load of nonsense. We were very, very clear that if people wanted a democratic moment, if they wanted an election, we offered it to the Labour opposition, and mysteriously they decided not to go for it.
So you mentioned to me before that you think I might have disagreed with something I tweeted in 2016. If you'd have gone through my most recent tweets, you would probably have seen that probably a few months ago, I called Boris Johnson an absolute wazzock. I thought he would be the worst Prime Minister in history probably for our country. And I actually will stand corrected on that because I have quite a lot of regard and respect for what Boris Johnson is trying to do and the way that he is trying to move things forward, because people have lost trust and faith in our politicians. The way they behave, and we'll come on to it, I'm sure, in the next debate as well, they are behaving like absolute childish idiots. Often now, not infrequently, often. And the situation is, and it's all well and good, and you studied EU law and all of these technicalities and all the rest of it, when you ask most people who voted Brexit why they're frustrated, and I speak to people often about this, and I represent my own view here too. On our leaflet that everyone received, it said, Parliament will implement whatever you vote. And it is that simple point which is frustrating people. And Boris Johnson seems to be the only person who has the balls to stand up, say what he believes, and try to move things forward.
OK, right, it's now time for me to prorogue that debate.